My dad told me, "Call your grandpa while I'm in the ICU." Instead, I called a lawyer and filed a $65,000 lawsuit that finally made them pay attention. While I was fighting for my life, they chose dinner at Rachel's. 60 days later, I evicted them from the $300,000 home I bought with my own hard work. Now let me tell you how it all began. I'm 34 years old. My wife, Lily, and I share an apartment in Manhattan, New York, about a 15-minute subway ride from the financial district. I work as a senior financial analyst for a well-known investment firm. Looking back, I've always considered myself lucky. At 18, I received a full scholarship to a top university. 4 years later, I graduated just as the stock market was booming. By 26, I'd saved enough to buy my own apartment. At 30, I was promoted to a management position. From the outside, my life seemed incredibly stable. And to be fair, for the most part, it was. I had a family, imperfect as it was, and a place to go for holidays like Christmas and Thanksgiving, plus the occasional weekend get-together. But then, everything changed after an unexpected event. I was involved in a serious car accident. Oddly enough, that accident led me to Lily, who is now my wife. But it also gave me the clarity to finally see the truth and the strength to sever ties. With Richard, Diane, and Rachel, the people I used to call Dad, Mom, and my younger sister, I had just wrapped up a board meeting and was heading back to my Manhattan apartment. I was driving along FDR Drive when a truck coming the other way lost control and swerved directly into my lane. My only option was to yank the steering wheel hard to the right to avoid a head-on collision. The impact sounded like a massive steel block had fallen from a skyscraper onto the pavement. Even though the airbags deployed in time, my head slammed hard against the side frame, and I felt blood trickling from my forehead down to my cheek. My vision blurred, and a loud ringing filled my ears. But I was still conscious. The EMTs quickly stabilized my neck with a rigid collar before carefully moving me onto a stretcher. On the way to the hospital, a young nurse kept checking on me, asking questions like, "Do you know what day it is? Can you tell me where you are? What's your full name?" I could answer all of them, but a couple required a moment of thought. My head felt like it had a heavy stone on it, and everything around me moved slowly, as if shrouded in a thick fog. When we arrived at Mount Sinai Hospital, Dr. Peterson, an older man with salt and pepper hair, a calming voice, and a steady demeanor, assessed me. After a preliminary neurological exam, he ordered a CT scan. He returned with the results, stating, "In a serious tone, you've sustained a mild concussion, and your right shoulder is severely dislocated. If we don't operate immediately, there's a risk of permanent nerve damage." I nodded, letting him know I was still awake and understood. A few seconds later, he explained, "Due to the head trauma, your ability to make decisions is currently impaired. According to medical protocol, we must assess your capacity to give informed consent before administering general anesthesia." The words that followed hit me hard. I had always prided myself on being in control, but this time I was powerless. To grasp the situation, Dr. Peterson carefully emphasized that I was not legally able to sign the operation consent form myself. I would need to contact my next of kin to get their approval for the procedure. At that moment, with my thoughts still hazy and my shoulder throbbing, I realized I had no choice. Much as I dreaded it, I had to pick up the phone and call the people I still considered family. Following the doctor's instructions, my parents, Richard and Diane, were the first people who came to mind. My head was pounding in harsh waves, and my vision flickered, but I was still conscious enough to recall my phone password. I looked at the nurse standing behind me and asked, "My phone password is 0102. Could you call my parents for me?" Lily nodded and quickly unlocked the phone with the code I gave her. A few minutes later, she turned to me and said, "I called the contacts saved as your dad and mom, but no one answered." Hearing that, I tried to sit up, but a sharp pain shot through my right shoulder, forcing me to lie back down immediately. I couldn't move. So, Lily offered to send them a text instead. She helped me type a simple message to my father. "I was in an accident. I'm at Mount Sinai Hospital. Can you come and help me?" Less than 2 minutes later, my phone rang. Lily picked it up hopefully. They had responded, but after reading it, her tone softened. She said they were going to Rachel's place for dinner. Hearing that message repeated to me, I was speechless. My mind felt clouded, and a strange, heavy emptiness settled in my chest. When Lily saw I was still silent and unmoving, she offered to send another message. I nodded. She texted on my behalf. Dad, I need surgery. The hospital requires consent from a family member. The next 5 minutes were completely silent. All I could hear was the steady beep of the heart monitor and the occasional footsteps echoing down the hall. The phone suddenly buzzed again, signaling a new message. Lily checked it right away. After a startled silence, she mumbled, "Oh my God." The way her voice dropped made me realize something was terribly wrong. I asked her what it said. She paused before reading it aloud. "Can't. This wait? We're busy right now. If it's urgent, call your grandfather." Lily looked at me with sadness in her eyes. As for me, something inside me snapped. Bah. A burst of pure rage erupted in my chest like dry wood catching fire. My skull throbbed. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would explode. The fury, combined with the head injuries, completely overwhelmed me. My vision narrowed. My ears rang, and it felt as if someone was squeezing the air from my lungs. Then everything went black. I can't remember what happened after that. All I know is that when I opened my eyes again, the first sound I heard was a familiar voice. Shouting my name, "Noah, can you hear me?" That voice belonged to my grandfather. Henry. My grandfather arrived and signed the consent form for me, and I was soon taken into surgery. The operation went smoothly. When I woke up in the recovery area, the first thing I saw was my grandfather. He had been sitting by my side the entire time, holding a cup of coffee that had long since grown cold. When he saw my eyes open, he smiled and said, "Everything's fine now, Noah. The doctor said you're doing well." Hearing his words, I gave him a faint nod and thanked him. My shoulder was neatly bandaged, and the medication had helped quiet the pounding in my head. What brought me the most comfort wasn't the successful surgery, but knowing that someone cared enough to be there. After asking a few questions about how I was feeling, my grandfather fell silent. He gazed out the window for a moment, as if lost. In deep thought, his eyes were filled with a quiet sadness, as if he was reliving events he had tried to forget. A few minutes later, he turned back to me, his voice soft and calm. He said, "Noah, not everyone who shares your blood is truly family." When he said it, something inside me broke. But at the same time, it felt as if he had finally spoken the truth I'd carried for years, but never dared to voice. Those comments gently, yet completely, severed the last ties that had bound me to the idea of a loving family. I stayed in the AE hospital for 4 more days before being discharged. During that time, my grandfather took care of me. My parents didn't send a single message or make a single call. No one showed up at my hospital room door. The phone remained silent, as if there was nothing left to say between us. Lily was the day shift nurse assigned to my room. At first, I only noticed her because she helped me contact my family after I was admitted. But over time, I realized Lily was doing far more than just her job. Every time she came in to check on me, she'd stay for a few extra minutes to ask how I was doing. Not the typical clinical questions, but genuine inquiries like, "How are you feeling today? Or is there anything else you need?" Her eyes were always full of real warmth. The way Lily looked at me stood out the most. Unlike the detached professionalism of other medical staff, there was neither pity nor disdain in her gaze. Instead, it was the look of someone who truly cared, someone who saw that my pain stemmed not only from physical injuries, but also from family silence and indifference. Lily offered to help when she saw how exhausted my grandfather looked after sitting by my side all day. She regularly stopped by after her shifts ended, bringing snacks for my grandfather or simply sitting with him to keep him company. She would gently tell him, "Don't worry, I'll watch Noah for a while. Why don't you go down to the cafeteria and get some rest?" Every time she said that, something inside me softened. While lying in that hospital bed, I opened the message my father had sent me and handed the phone to my grandfather. He read it, then simply shook his head. He didn't say anything, but his eyes conveyed a deep, quiet disappointment. A few minutes, Later, he spoke softly. I called your parents. I even called Rachel. I thought maybe they didn't realize how serious this was. When he said that, I felt both surprised and let down. He had reached out to them, but they never responded. After a moment, he added, even more quietly, but after I explained everything, they just said, he's got doctors, and hung up. No one asked how much pain you were in. No one asked what room you were in. Hearing that, I couldn't respond. I just nodded slightly, my throat tight with emotion. And then, perhaps to lift my spirits or encourage me, he handed me a small piece of paper with a phone number scrawled on it. With a playful twinkle in his eye, he stated, "This is Lily's number. It took me some effort to get it. You owe her dinner." I stared at him, shocked, but something warm stirred inside me. Perhaps he had seen something I hadn't yet admitted to. Myself and I had no idea she would one day be my wife. My grandfather slept soundly that night, but I remained awake, lost in old memories. Akil was 2 years younger than me, and my parents always treated us equally. Everything was fair, including birthdays, Christmas gifts, and toys. No one ever received more than the other. My mother would say, "You're the older brother, but you're still my child, just like your sister." But everything changed when I was 8 and Rachel got sick. She soon had a high fever and was rushed to the hospital. After a battery of tests, doctors diagnosed her with meningitis. It felt as if our entire world had crumbled. I remember perfectly how the mood in our home completely shifted. My mother refused to leave the hospital. She even slept in a chair by Rachel's bed for 2 straight weeks. My father put his work on hold to stay there, his eyes red from sleepless nights. I watched him cry for the first time in my life, a man as strong as my father, who trembled whenever a doctor entered the room. At that moment, I understood she needed their help. I was even proud of myself for being mature enough to handle things without adding to their burden. I got myself to school and completed my homework on my own. Neighbors would say I was such a mature little boy. I never expected things to be the same after Rachel's recovery. She became the special girl of the house. My mother would panic whenever she tripped, afraid she was still fragile. When Rachel's grades slipped, my father would say, "Don't push her. Her brain is still healing." Rachel learned to embrace that role. She gradually figured out how to take advantage of my parents' worry. If she didn't want to do chores, she could just remark, "My head hurts." If she needed something, she'd mention being sleepy, and my parents would always give in. I don't believe Rachel intended to manipulate them. She was just a kid who learned to read the room. But what troubled me was how my parents' attitudes toward me gradually shifted. If I asked for fairness, they argued I lacked empathy. If I complained about partiality, they labeled me selfish and fortunate to be healthy. My mother always told me you should be grateful you didn't go through what your sister did. But there were times when, watching Rachel's boundless love, I secretly wished I was in that hospital bed instead. No one needed to remind me anymore. I knew where I stood in the family, a typical kid who didn't require extra attention. And now my wish had come true. I was the one in the hospital. But I didn't see my parents by my bedside as they had been. For Rachel, nobody stayed awake through the night. Nobody cried out of fear. There was only one cold, distant message. "Can't this wait? We're busy right now." That was when I realized the terrible truth. Being in the hospital doesn't earn you affection. Love has to be there already, waiting for an opportunity to manifest itself. To understand why my father's message hurt so much, I need to tell you about everything I sacrificed and contributed since I was 18 that year. My family went completely bankrupt. Father Richard Bennett owned a small transportation company. In Queens, however, the business failed due to a bad investment in a botched logistics project, leaving us over $600,000 in debt. I remember the night he sat at the kitchen table, his head in his hands, holding a bank foreclosure letter. His voice shook as he told us, "We have to move into a rental. I'm sorry, kids." Losing the house wasn't the hardest part. It was seeing my father cry, a man I had always admired for his strength and unwavering resolve, suddenly sitting there like a broken man. My mother placed a hand on his shoulder to comfort him, but I could see tears welling up in her eyes too. We soon moved into a small rented apartment in the Bronx, and our entire lives transformed. My mother started working double shifts at a cleaning company to keep us afloat. My father spent his days applying for jobs, but his age and bankruptcy history resulted in one rejection after another. As for me, I resolved not to become another burden. After graduating high school, I was awarded a full scholarship to Baruch College. At the same time, I took on part-time jobs at a nearby coffee shop, a Barnes & Noble bookstore, and tutored high school kids in math on weekends. I worked approximately 40 hours each week and maintained a 3.8 GPA. Rachel didn't apply for scholarships. She didn't get a job. Instead, she enrolled in a community college with lower tuition. But she still relied on our parents for everything, including tuition, meals, and new clothes. Despite our limited finances, my parents went above and beyond to help her. I remember telling her at one dinner, "You should get a part-time job to help out." But before she could respond, my father cut in. "Rachel's health isn't fully stable after what she went through with meningitis. We can't push her too hard." Hearing him jump to her defense, Rachel gave a faint smile and said, "I'll look into it." But months passed and she never did. My parents continued to make excuses for her. After that night, I never brought it up at the dinner table again. I graduated with a finance degree. Almost immediately, landed a position at Goldman Sachs with a starting salary of $80,000 a year. Something most of my peers could only dream of. I had saved enough money to buy my first condo on the Lower East Side. I didn't brag to anyone in my family. I was just quietly proud of what I had accomplished. Mother called in November, just before Christmas. She sounded exhausted. "Psh," said Noah. "The landlord just told us the rent is going up to $2,000 a month. We can't afford that. I don't know what we're going to do." Hearing it made my chest clench. Regardless of how unfair they had been to me, they were still my parents. I couldn't just sit back and watch them be forced into a rundown neighborhood because they couldn't afford rent. A week later, I decided to spend $300,000 of my money to buy them a small house in Astoria, Queens. It had one bedroom and a small garden in the back, enough to provide them with a secure living situation. After years of struggle, my mother hugged me tightly the day I handed over the keys, saying, "Noah, I'm so proud of you. You're the best son I could ever ask for." At that point, I smiled, convinced that all the difficult years had been worthwhile. But that feeling only lasted 3 weeks. My mom called again on a Thursday evening. This time, her tone was cautious. She said, "Noah, this house feels a bit small. Do you think you could get a bigger one so Rachel can move in with us? She just broke up with her boyfriend and needs family around her." I was stunned. Rachel worked full-time at a graphic design business and was financially secure enough to rent her own place. I tried to remain calm, telling her Rachel can rent her own apartment. She's an adult with an income. But my mother dismissed it. With a stronger tone, she answered, "Rachel only makes $50,000 a year, unlike you. Besides, she's a girl. She needs more protection." This made my blood boil, said straight out. "I bought that house for you and Dad, not for it to become a shelter for Rachel. If you're unhappy, you can figure out another solution." There was silence for a few seconds. Then she replied in a mournful tone, "Noah, when did you become so selfish? Family is about love and sharing." And then I realized something painful. In my mother's eyes, anything I achieved was only important if it benefited Rachel. Still, I let them stay in that house until the day I was lying in a hospital bed and received that message. "Can't this wait? We're busy right now." I finally realized it was time to reclaim what was mine. Returning to my story, I walked into the office of Charles Harrison, one of Manhattan's most renowned attorneys. He was in his early 40s with salt and pepper hair and sharp eyes behind rimless glasses. After hearing my ordeal and my request, Mr. Harrison looked at me and asked in a calm, professional tone, "Mr. Bennett, are you certain about this decision? It's a significant and resolute step to take against your own family." At that moment, I turned to gaze out the window. People on Madison Avenue rushed through their daily routines. Inside me, an emptiness expanded as if I were standing outside. of existence, witnessing fragments of happiness I had never experienced. After a few seconds, I turned back to Mr. Harrison and stated, "I've made my decision. Please proceed with the paperwork." A legal notice was issued to my parents' Astoria, Queens home. I had asked Mr. Harrison to draft a legal letter informing them they needed to vacate the property within 30 days. The reason was clear. The owner wanted to reclaim the land for personal use. As soon as they received the letter, my parents began calling nonstop. The phone rang from morning until night, but I didn't answer. They sent text messages, which I deleted without reading. They even showed up at my Wall Street office building, but I had already informed security that personal visits would not be allowed on my floor. The same day, my grandfather called. His voice sounded concerned. "Noah, I know you're angry, but is there any chance you'd reconsider? They're still your parents." Quietly responded, "Grandpa, do you remember what you told me when I was hospitalized? You said not everyone who shares your blood is truly family. I understand what that means now." He was silent for a long time. Finally, he sighed and replied, "I understand, Noah. I worry about you." I thanked him for calling and hung up, knowing I had reached the point of no return. After being discharged from the hospital, I called Lily, using the number my grandfather had worked so hard to get for me. For the first time, I was nervous about inviting a woman to dinner. It wasn't because I lacked experience. It was because Lily was unlike anyone I had ever met. Our first date took place at a modest bistro in Greenwich Village. I expected us to stick to typical topics: work, hobbies, the weather. But Lily wasn't interested in small talk. She wanted to delve into deeper issues. She asked about my family, how I felt in the hospital, and what had been on my mind, things I had never spoken aloud to anyone. What surprised me most was Lily's complete lack of judgment. When I told her about my family, she simply listened and nodded, as if she understood. I saw neither pity nor astonishment in her eyes, just genuine empathy. After that night, we started seeing each other more frequently, usually in the evenings, and with each meeting, I discovered a new facet of her. Lily was born and raised in Brooklyn as the youngest of 3 sisters. She hadn't become a nurse due to family pressure. She chose it because she genuinely cared about people. That explained why she went above and beyond for me in the hospital, and why her kindness never felt like an obligation. Our connection progressed. Faster than either of us imagined, Lily became the only person I wanted to share everything with. More importantly, she was the first person to make me feel truly valued for who I was, rather than for what I could provide. In the days that followed, word quickly spread through the Bennett household that I had evicted my parents. My parents told their version of the story, portraying me as the ungrateful son who heartlessly abandoned his aging parents. The first call came from Aunt Carol, my mother's younger sister, who was drinking coffee and reading the Wall Street Journal before leaving for work when my phone rang. When I picked up, she yelled into the line, enraged, "Noah Bennett, what the hell are you doing? You have any idea your mother's been crying for 3 straight days?" A deep, familiar weariness washed over me. Aunt Carol didn't ask what had happened. She went straight to the accusation. Coldly, I responded, "Do you even know what my father did while I was in the hospital?" There was a pause. Then, with a shaky voice, she added, "Well, you can't just throw your parents out of their home." That was when I realized that any discussion would be pointless. I hung up after saying, "Aunt Carol, this was my decision. I'm not going to argue." About it, less than 2 hours later, my cousin Tyler called. His tone was hostile from the beginning. "Noah, I heard what happened. What you did was messed up. No one in this family would ever do something like that." My hands began to shake as rage surged within me. I managed to speak through clenched teeth. "Tyler, don't call me again." I hung up right then. I didn't bother explaining. I knew nobody would believe me anyway. For the remainder of the week, my phone rang nonstop. Distant relatives I barely knew called to chastise me. Friends of my parents called to try and calm me down. Even others I had never spoken to called to voice their outrage. Despite the ringing phones, the rants, the guilt trips, and the lectures, one thing remained constant. I stood by my decision. Then, about 10 days after I submitted the notice to my parents to leave the house, the big storm hit. I remember it clearly. It was an early weekday morning. I was in my office preparing for a client appointment when Megan, my assistant, knocked. On the door with a troubled expression, she said, "Mr. Bennett, would you mind checking Facebook for a moment? There's a post going around, and it's about you." I grabbed my phone and accessed the link Rachel had emailed me. What I saw made my heart stop. My sister Rachel had made a post in a Facebook group called Family Drama.
Oh.
The post had 4 photographs. The first image was of my parents packing their belongings, looking tired and exhausted. The second featured a small moving truck loaded with boxes. The third image showed my mother sitting on the floor, face buried in her hands, weeping, and the last photograph was of me, taken a few years ago. The caption hit me like a punch to the chest. Noah Bennett has officially kicked his elderly parents out of their home. The house they've lived in for the past 2 years is now just another tool he's using to punish them. Money can buy a house, but it can't buy a conscience. Hundreds of comments poured in beneath the post. "Oh my God, who does that to their aging parents? This is exactly what's wrong with this ungrateful generation. People like this deserve to be boycotted." The world spun around me as I read through the deluge of fury. Megan glanced at me with concern. "Mr. Bennett, are you all right?" A few seconds later, I composed myself and said, "Cancel all of my meetings today. I need time to deal with this." Rachel's post went viral with over 5,000 shares in just hours. I received hundreds of messages from strangers via Messenger. Most of them were filled with insults and hostility. And as I had anticipated, the following morning, Mr. Whitmore, the managing director of my division, summoned me to his office. He was in his mid-50s and had always admired me. When I walked in, he looked serious. He got right to the point. "Noah, I'm aware of what's happening with your family. Normally, the company doesn't get involved in personal matters." My heart started to race. I knew what was coming. After a moment's pause, he continued, "But this has started to affect the firm's reputation. We've received hundreds of calls from clients asking about you. Some have even said they don't want to work with a company that employs someone so cruel." It felt like someone had slapped me in the face. My voice quivered as I asked, "Are you firing me?" Mr. Whitmore sighed and said, "No, Noah, you're a valuable employee. But I need you to take a paid leave of absence until things settle down. I hope you understand." I understood what he was saying, despite his conciliatory tone. My career had just suffered a significant blow. I said calmly, "I understand, Mr. Whitmore. I'll take the leave." Then I exited his office. Later that day, when I saw the formal HR email confirming my leave of absence, I felt like an absolute failure. That afternoon, after leaving the office, I found myself again sitting across from attorney Charles Harrison. This time, a large folder was placed on the table. Inside were printed copies of Rachel's post, the hateful comments that followed, and most crucially, my company's email putting me on leave. After reviewing everything, Mr. Harrison spoke in his usual professional manner. "Mr. Bennett, based on the evidence you've provided, we have a strong legal case to file a defamation lawsuit against Rachel Bennett for slander and damages to your reputation and financial standing." I hesitated for a moment. After all, Rachel was still my sister. But then I remembered the barrage of harsh comments in the family drama group, the impact on my professional image, the lost clients, the sheer injustice, the silence of those who were supposed to support me. A few seconds later, with determination in my voice, I stated, "Mr. Harrison, let's move forward. File the lawsuit." After leaving Harrison's office that day, I began my second phase of response. I shared my first piece of proof, a screenshot of my father's text message from the day I was lying in a hospital bed, not waiting for him to come and sign the operation consent paperwork. The message was simple. "Can't this wait? We're busy, right?" Now, I didn't write a caption. I didn't explain. I included the screenshot directly beneath Rachel's original post. Then I shared it on my profile and reposted it in the family drama group in case she decided to delete her own. Almost immediately, public opinion divided. Some people began to defend me, saying things like, "If that's how the parents treated him when he was in the hospital, how can you blame him?" Others, particularly when Rachel claimed the text was fabricated, began to criticize me, labeling me ungrateful and a liar trying to clean up his reputation. However, I no longer cared about their opinions. After the lawsuit was finally filed in court, I obtained a certified copy from Mr. Harrison. Then, I posted it as a follow-up to my original message, plain and direct, stating that I would not back down. I was prepared to see this through, too. The end. My mother called me. It was the first time she had called me after the disaster. She had already moved out of the house I had purchased for them in Astoria. I could hear her shaky voice as I answered. "Noah, can we talk?" she inquired. A searing pain struck me in the chest. Her voice sounded older and more fragile than I. "Remembered," I responded in a cold tone. "What do you want to say?" Almost pleading, she added, "Noah, I know I made mistakes, but could you please drop the lawsuit against Rachel?" When she said those words, I felt a surge of rage like dry kindling catching fire. My blood pounded and my heart raced. "Do you ever stop to think about what my life might become because of what she said?" I questioned in a steady but firm voice. She was silent. The line remained still, as if the air had frozen. She then remarked, barely holding back tears, "She's still your sister, Noah. Family taking each other to court? It just isn't right." It felt like someone had driven a knife into my chest. Despite everything, she still cared exclusively about Rachel. With my throat tight and my voice shrill, I continued, "I'm not dropping the case. My family died a month ago, and now you all have to deal with the consequences." For the first time, I hung up on my mother. Didn't feel any regret. Not for 1 second. On Saturday night, I was sitting in the living room reading when the doorbell rang. It was approximately 8 p.m., not exactly when I would expect visitors. When I opened the door, I froze. Rachel, my mother, and my father all stood in front of me. Rachel spoke first, her voice shaking. "Noah, I know I was wrong. Please, I'm begging you to drop the lawsuit." I gazed at her before turning to face our parents, who were standing behind her. My father appeared years older. His hair had completely grayed, and his back was bent. My mother seemed thinner, her face drawn, as if she'd been ill for some time. Rachel sobbed, "I'll lose my job if you don't drop the lawsuit. Husbands. Already talking about divorce? I'll lose everything." Hearing that, something twisted in my chest. She was still my sister after all. But then I remembered how it felt to be in that hospital bed, alone and helpless. I remembered the outpouring of anger on social media. I recalled witnessing my career unravel due to a lie. In a cold tone, I asked, "Rachel, do you remember how no one came to see me when I was in the hospital? Do you know what it felt like to read that message from Dad?" Rachel said nothing. She kept her head lowered. My parents stood behind her, silent. After approximately a minute, my mother walked forward. Her voice was imploring, "Noah, please drop the lawsuit. I promise we'll make it up to you. I'll do anything you ask." When I heard that, I felt a strong sense of exhaustion. I said quietly, "Mom, there are things you can't make up for. Reputation, trust, and dignity are almost impossible to regain once they're gone. And real love doesn't come from obligation. So please don't talk to me about making it up." I then turned to Rachel, who was still staring at the floor, and stated, "No one came for me when I was in the hospital, and now I can't be the one to come and save anyone." With that, I returned inside and closed the door. Through the glass. I noticed them standing there for a while. I finally turned and walked away. The Manhattan court heard my case against Rachel. The trial lasted 3 days and featured various family members and acquaintances in court. Attorney Charles Harrison had meticulously prepared his case. He explained piece by piece how Rachel's Facebook post had harmed my professional reputation and career. Lily sat in the row designated for my support, her hand firmly clutching mine whenever tension rose in the room. Her presence was my anchor, the most powerful source of strength during those awful court days. On the first day, Mr. Harrison presented my father's text message, the one he sent while I was in the hospital. When it was read aloud in court, I witnessed numerous individuals shaking their heads and clearly upset. On the second day, expert witnesses in media and reputation management took the stand. They discussed how Rachel's post went viral and how that exposure affected my public image. According to Dr. Collins, a social media expert, this post was shared over 5,000 times and generated thousands of negative comments. The damage to the plaintiff's reputation is both severe and long-lasting. On the third day, Rachel finally admitted complete responsibility. With a shaky voice, she told, "The court, I admit I didn't take the time to understand the full situation before posting. I let my emotions take over and cause serious harm to my brother." When the judge inquired if she had intended to destroy my reputation, Rachel responded, "No, Your Honor, but I understand that intent does not excuse the consequences." After 3 days of testimony, the jury only needed 2 hours to reach a decision. Judge Whitman, a stern man in his mid-50s, announced the verdict aloud. Rachel was required to issue a public apology on all social media platforms where the original message was disseminated. She was also ordered to pay $20,000 in emotional damages and $45,000 in professional losses as a result of my 3-month suspension from work, for a total of $65,000 due within 60 days. As the decision was read, I noticed Rachel slump into her seat, her face pale. Her husband, Evan, sat beside her in silence. My folks were speechless. Lily gripped my hand, whispering, "It's over now." Rachel posted her court-mandated apologies the day following the ruling. She wrote, "I was wrong to post false information about my brother, Noah Bennett. I apologize for the damage caused to his reputation and career. I've learned that truth matters more than emotion." But the apologies arrived too late. Rachel's design studio terminated her contract as soon as the verdict was announced. Evan filed for divorce shortly after, citing extreme stress and financial difficulties. I didn't feel victorious as I watched Rachel's life fall apart. I didn't feel fulfilled. I had an overwhelming sense of emptiness, as if I had just won a battle that no one wanted to fight. My life has regained its rhythm. Following the lawsuit, Mr. Whitmore promoted me to vice president. He told me, "Noah, how you handled that crisis shows the composure of a true leader." I have no idea where my parents or Rachel are living right now. My life is now dedicated exclusively to those who truly matter. My grandfather Henry is the person I talk to the most. On weekends, Lily and I usually visit him in Brooklyn. He's always thrilled to see us, especially now that Lily is pregnant with our first child. Lily and I got married in a small, intimate ceremony. Only her family and my grandfather were present. My parents and Rachel were not invited, but I didn't feel like I missed out on anything. It was the happiest day of my life. Lily is 6 months along. Every night, I place my palm on her abdomen and feel our baby girl's tiny kicks. We already know her name, Grace. I've since rented out my parents' old Astoria house for $2,000 per month. Every penny goes to a fund for Grace's future education. I am not sharing this story to complain, and I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm telling you this because I know there are people like me who have wasted years believing that if they simply worked hard enough, or good enough, and gave enough, their family would eventually love them back and realize their worth. The truth is, not all families are worth your commitment. If you are listening to this and feel like you are the only one left behind, please know that you are not alone, and you're not wrong for walking away. Before I conclude this story, I'd like to ask you, who has been with me through every word, memory, and moment? Was it wrong of me to ask my parents to leave the home I had purchased with my own hands? Was I wrong to take my sister to court too? Defend the truth and my reputation? Please share your opinions in the comments. I would love to hear your tale. If you've experienced unpleasant family boundaries and any of this resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I will continue to share family stories and create boundaries, not to exclude others, but to protect myself. You very much for listening, and if you're in the heart of a storm right now, realize that you're not alone. I wish you peace today and every day.